Welcome everyone to this first meeting of our new community of practice for Schoolyard Forests. We're so thrilled to gather this community together to learn about and build community around Schoolyard Forests. And for many of you here, this is born out of the National COVID Outdoor Learning Initiative's community of practice for schools taking learning outdoors. And many of you were part of that community. And so thank you for continuing to join with us. And if you're new, welcome. And many of our speakers from that previous community of practice inspired us and continue to in this work. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our team that's here today. We are lucky to have Sharon Danks, Green Schoolyards, America's CEO and founder, joining us today. I am Lauren McKenna. I'm a program manager with Green Schoolyards America, and we're also joined by Dante Sudolevsky, who is our communications and program coordinator, who will be helping on the tech side. Erica Fine, who is our senior program manager, unfortunately is unable to join us today, but she played a big role in organizing this meeting and will be hosting them in the future. So I'll go ahead and pass it on to Sharon, who will lead us into the meeting.
Thank you, Lauren. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sharon Danks, and I'm the founder and executive director of Green Schoolyards America, a national nonprofit organization based in Berkeley, California. We're really excited to be welcoming you to the first meeting of the Community of Practice for Schoolyard Forests today. The program is part of the new National Schoolyard Forest System that Green Schoolyards America launched this year to help school districts across the country increase tree canopy on their school grounds in places that will directly shade and protect pre-K to 12 students from extreme heat and rising temperatures due to climate change. This community of practice is also connected to the California Schoolyard Forest System, which is the first state in this national initiative. Next slide, please. The Community of Practice for Schoolyard Forests will be a free, open, and welcoming monthly discussion forum for administrators and staff from school districts, County Office of Education, public agencies in California and around the country, and a place to share information that will make it easier to establish schoolyard forests at scale. Our goal is to provide support and to build a collegial network across the country. We also welcome colleagues working with tree planting organizations, landscape architects, and others who are interested in this topic from anywhere in the world who'd like to help school districts with their schoolyard forests in some way. Next, please. The community of practice will in each session will include guest speakers. It will include networking time in small groups at the end. And we will also be in each session announcing any updates or grant opportunities and resources as they become available on our outdoor learning library, new forest resources, and other things that other organizations around the country are producing that relate to this topic. Next, please. Our schedule will be that we'll hold these meetings on the third Tuesday of the month between January and May to begin. So we won't have a meeting in December. And we will be recording the sessions, and they'll be available on our website and also on our YouTube channel following the presentation a few days later. Next. So as we begin this new community of practice, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our organization and start with some brief background information about Green Schoolyards and Schoolyard Forests for those who are new to the field, and also talk a little bit about the need for this work. Green Schoolyards America collaborates with school districts and public agencies to establish large-scale living schoolyard programs that transform school grounds into ecologically rich park-like green spaces. Our overall goal is to improve children's learning, health, and happiness while building ecological and climate resilience. We're working to change the paradigm for school ground design, use, and management so all children will have access to the natural world and the places that they visit every day. Next. And so I'll just talk really briefly about benefits of Green Schoolyards next. So Green Schoolyards are great places to take learning outdoors across the curriculum and grade levels, and have perfect places for hands-on resources. Next. They help with mental health. They promote social emotional well-being for students through the contact with nature. They give us places to relax and places to learn social skills. Next. And they are places that center children and youth. They are living schoolyards, and schoolyard forests are places that are designed, have a design outcome to increase children's joy, laughter, and happiness. Next. They're also places where we can use child-friendly green infrastructure to support local ecological systems and strengthen wildlife corridors in our communities, infiltrate stormwater as it can soak into the ground, cool urban heat islands, and improve air quality. So they have environmental benefits too. Next. So why do we need green schoolyards and schoolyard forests? Next. Across the country, every day, millions of K-12 students attend public schools on more than a total of 2 million acres of public land. In many of our schools, there is a lot of pavement. Not every school has this much pavement as shown in these images, but there is a lot of pavement. There's also a lot of space that isn't directly contributing to the well-being of students, their communities, or the environment, and it could be. Next. The climate crisis is also impacting children's health and well-being, so schools across the country and around the world need to adapt their grounds to respond to climate change and protect children and youth from extreme heat. They're particularly vulnerable due to smaller body size, and we know that millions of children across the country don't have any shade at all at school. Next. We're also concerned about equity. Tree canopy equity is essential. Most schools can use trees. For some reason, our design palette across the country, even in cities where there are a lot of forests, don't include trees above kids' heads in almost any of our schools. But the lack of shade is particularly urgent in places that currently have the fewest trees, the hottest present and future climates, and in underserved communities. Next. We've been doing research over the last 5 years to take measurements of school ground temperatures, and we've noticed that things like the poured in place rubber, things made from tire rubber, can heat up on a 90-degree day to 166 degrees, for example. So it's the choices that we make in selecting building materials and planting materials impacts the microclimate and contributes to urban heat island effects, which are felt directly by children. Next. So just as a quick example of that, this slide taken with a camera that does thermal imaging shows that the materials in this particular schoolyard have, on a day that was 81 degrees, we were getting temperatures of 133 degrees on the surface of the poured in place rubber, while at the same time, not far away, the asphalt was cooler at 107 and the grass in full sun was 83. So there are certain materials that many schools use, that common materials that add heat to our schoolyards, and others that don't add as much heat, even if they're both in the sun. Next. It also really matters how much we shade an environment. So in this similar picture, you can see that the same asphalt, shaded and unshaded, has a 33-degree temperature difference just by adding the shade. So if we have a material that's a hot material in particular, we can shade it, but we can also cool all materials with shade. And it's also interesting to note that the shade here brings the surface temperature down below the air temperature, which is really important. So shading can reduce the temperatures where kids are present. Next. We've been starting a project to map school grounds across California, and we have some preliminary research results. We'll be publishing a study in the new year with more information. But our preliminary results show that in California, for example, we have an average of a mean of 9% tree canopy across the whole state per location, and there are a total of about 2,250,000 students who are attending schools that have less than 5% tree canopy on their whole site, and more than 4 million students who are attending schools with less than 10% tree canopy on their site. Next. And those trees might be placed in locations that are, while present on the property, are not above kids' heads. So there's a lot of tree planting across the country in our school grounds, in places where they look nice for the neighborhood, but that doesn't help shade the children during the school day. And so we need to be putting more shade on the playground itself. Next. So what we were working on with the National Schoolyard Forest System and the California Schoolyard Forest System is paradigm shift to try to transform through collective action of many organizations and school districts agencies across the country transform thousands of acres from pavement into schoolyard forest and living schoolyards. And that takes coordination and collaboration. And these systems that we're setting up now are vehicles to help facilitate that transition. Next. And so I just want to talk really briefly about the California Schoolyard Forest System, which is the first state to be working on a statewide initiative to bring this change about. The founding partners of the California Schoolyard Forest System are Green Schoolyards America, CAL FIRE, which is the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, the California Department of Education, and a nonprofit called 10 Strands. Next. Together, creating the California Schoolyard Forest System, which is a new statewide initiative to increase tree canopy on public school grounds across California to directly shade and protect pre-K to 12 students from extreme heat and rising temperatures due to climate change. Next. The goals are to plant enough trees by 2030 that when they're mature, will cover at least 30% of each school property in the areas used by pre-K to 12 children and youth during the school day. That's a lot of trees and a big change from the numbers I was just showing you. It's an ambitious goal. Next. We are centering equity by prioritizing schools and districts in underserved communities with the highest poverty levels, fewest trees, and hottest climates. Next. Using school grounds as outdoor learning laboratories across the curriculum and across grade levels. Next. And using the grounds to build environmental and climate literacy by engaging students in standards-based hands-on research, design, planting, and stewardship of schoolyard forests. Next. So what are schoolyard forests? They are climate oases on school campuses designed to nurture and protect students from extreme heat. Key features of these forests are trees planted in large groves so students can take shelter when the weather's hot. Climate adapted tree planting pellets with high biodiversity and many large tree species. So the trees will be prepared for weather as it warms. They're designed to encourage student access to shade during their outdoor learning, physical activities, social gatherings, and plays. So they're in the places on the schoolyard that are used by kids during the school day. This idea can be adapted for most campus sizes, age groups, and climates. And the overall goal is to engage students in design, planting, and stewardship of the schoolyard forest as well. Next. So how is this different from a living schoolyard? The schoolyard forest can be components of living schoolyards, which are broader plans for green space on school grounds. And living schoolyards themselves are richly layered park-like environments that strengthen local ecological systems and climate resilience while providing place-based hands-on learning resources for children and youth of all ages. Next. So the current work that we're doing on the schoolyard forest system in California is to start to set up a free online library that will be available to everyone, and it will also include materials useful nationally. We are working on planning and design guidelines, case studies, maintenance best practices, resources for engaging students, and the first materials will be up in the coming months. Certainly by the new year, we'll have at least a few up, and it will continue to be added to over time. We're doing research now too about systemic barriers and potential solutions to help make it easier to scale these ideas. And as I mentioned, we're mapping baseline data, and we'll share updates in our future meetings. Next. So now I would like to introduce our guest speakers for the day. I am very excited to welcome Steve Collins and Sofia Peltz from the Berkeley Unified School District, which is a district my children attended, and I love their work and just super excited about everything that they're doing. And thank you, Steve and Sofia, for being our inaugural speakers for the Schoolyard Forest Community of Practice. Steve Collins is the Facilities Maintenance Manager of Berkeley Unified School District. In his role, he oversees the implementation of many sustainability efforts, including green schoolyards and schoolyard forests. He says his career goal is to have as much positive impact on our environment as he can. Sofia Peltz is the Sustainability Program Coordinator for Berkeley Unified School District. She's responsible for implementing the goals in the 2018 Sustainability Plan for the district, specifically as they pertain to energy, water, transportation, and waste processes and projects. In this position, she's part of the team leading BUSD's commitment to integrating sustainable practices into the district's facilities, educational programs, and organizational culture. Welcome, Steve and Sofia.
Thanks so much for having us. Um, I want to start off by thanking Green Schoolyards America for inviting us to speak today. And we can start with the first slide. Thank you. So I want to start off by providing some background information about Berkeley Unified School District, which I think will help us give some context to the projects that we'll talk about later on in the presentation. So we're considered a small to medium-sized urban school district located in Berkeley, California. We have 3 preschools, 11 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, 1 comprehensive high school, 1 continuation school, and 1 adult school on approximately 100 acres of land. So for more than 2 decades now, BUSD has began to reimagine what schoolyards could be if they included native trees, edible gardens, natural play structures, and open to the larger community. Today, we are well on our way to transforming paved over schoolyards into green learning laboratories. Next slide. We have planted approximately 2,500 trees, built 17 edible schoolyards, school gardens, and 3 Miyawaki forests, which I'll get into in a little bit. Next slide. So the projects we chose to present today range in size, cost, and resources needed. The goal is to show you that creating a schoolyard forest can be done in many ways. There's not one size fits all for this kind of work. When we think about introducing a new project to our team, we try to prioritize the following things, that being a community design philosophy, which for us means working with students, parents, teachers, and administrators to identify needs and assess the scope of the project. We also prioritize ecological resilience, such as reducing heat islands like Sharon mentioned, and air pollution. We also prioritize outdoor learning and biodiversity by doing this transformation. And we really strive to create schoolyards that are dynamic, multi-use, nature-filled public spaces that improve the well-being of children and the environment at the same time. And what really gives this mission teeth is our sustainability plan that was passed in 2018 that has a whole section dedicated to schoolyards and greening schoolyards. Next slide. Steve, feel free to take it away.
Yes. So hello, everybody. I'm Steve Collins, and yes, we've had the great luxury of having a parent like Sharon Danks at our school, and I've personally worked with Sharon for more than 15 years now, I think. So, John Muir Elementary School is one of our more green schools. It has a daylighted creek. And just above the creek is a redwood grove. And I found that a couple teachers were using the creek area as a classroom, and they had this kind of beat up makeshift table and chairs with some cinder blocks and some old wood. And then the redwood area that looks down onto the creek area had like an old blacktop asphalt pathway going through it and an old rusty fence and all this kind of stuff. So we decided to create a little project out of it and enhance the learning area for the teachers and the students that go there. Next slide. So this here, we engaged a local landscape architect that is a very sustainable and green architect. On the left here, you see a rendering of the whole area. You can see the creek kind of going through the middle. And in the upper left-hand corner, the Habitat 2, there's a slight layout of the redwood. We replaced in the redwood area. We replaced the blacktop pathway with a redwood boardwalk and then added a deck. And the picture on the right here, you can see we're standing on the deck area. And the idea of this is now a teacher can bring a group of kids out and they can sit on this deck in the redwood grove and teach. Next slide, please. This is just another picture of the redwood deck. And off to the left there, down below is the creek area. Next, please. Next slide. This is the creek area down below. We built a couple large picnic table areas for the kids to sit at with the teacher. Actually, in the background there, you can see the old makeshift table that the teacher was using. We built a cabinet for the teacher to be able to store supplies. And then what you don't see here is all around the area up the hill behind us on the left are little seating areas with log rounds and boulders and things like that. And then off to the right is a pathway going down to the creek where kids can wander and learn and just be in nature. And the kids just love this stuff. We learned during the pandemic that both teachers and kids love being outside. Our nutrition services department is having a hard time getting people to go back into the cafeteria because they just want to be outside. Next slide, please. All right, Sophia.
Thanks. Yeah, so Washington Elementary School is kind of considered VUSD's first environmental schoolyard. It was actually designed in the 1970s and took over 10 years to complete. So it's a totally different scope and totally different type of project than what Steve just talked about. And since then, since the 1970s, there's been a couple of changes in the design. For example, there was a pond in Chickens, and that's no longer on the site. However, a redwood forest still stands strong. The designers, in collaboration with students, teachers, and the community, transformed what was an asphalt space into a lush natural environment. There's even a book written about it, which Sharon introduced me to, called The Life History of an Environmental Schoolyard by Robin Seymour and Herb H. Wong. I highly encourage you guys to check it out. It just really helps kind of identify a philosophy and a way of transforming schoolyards that really encourages you to incorporate student voice and student vision into a project. And I would say this project really set the tone for how we want to do green schoolyards in future projects. And the goal of the project was to reestablish the natural habitats that existed prior to the asphalt, and include students, teachers, and the community into that transformation. Next slide. And so this is just a visual of what the schoolyard has looked like through different iterations. So on the left is 1971, which it was completely asphalt. Then it's the late 1970s, maybe 1980. It was transformed into a really lush space. And you can see all of the different types of materials that are in the space. And then the present, 2022. And you can see in the back, there are lots of redwood trees and a deck. And next slide, there are more pictures. Yeah, and this is also another version of that picture. So we have some logs that students play and jump on and sit on, and a lot of teachers take their classes out here and utilize this space as an extension of the classroom. Next slide. A continuation, these are more redwood trees. Next slide. Next slide. Steve, feel free to take it away.
Yeah. Okay, so not everybody has a big forest on their schoolyard. So this one here is Berkeley Arts Magnet, what is an elementary school we have, and its main yard was pretty much all blacktop with a couple isolated trees in it, and then some shrubs along perimeters. And about 6 years ago, about 2015, we did a grounds improvement project. And so this is an example of a project any school can do, any school district can do on one of these schoolyards. It's all blacktop. That isn't like, you know, millions and millions of dollars. This is a fairly doable project. So we basically, in the project, in addition to other things, we cut out 2 areas of the blacktop. One's about 2,300 square feet. One is about 2,800 square feet. We created a redwood grove area with seating and everything. And then we also created another area, separate area on the other side of this of the playground. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of the redwood grove area that we created. We planted a handful of redwood trees. We have boulders and log rounds. So this is big enough for about 2 classes to be out there, but teachers bring about 1 class at a time throughout the day. We do not have a picture of the other space. I apologize, but it's the other space that was created is about equal to this. It's got picnic tables on it with trees on both sides, on hills with no mow grass. So, you know, these are very doable projects to green a schoolyard. Next slide.
And this,
So,
go for it. Do you take it away?
Okay. So this is our Ruth Actie Elementary School, used to be Jefferson. And it's not a newer project. This is an older project where kind of a band of trees were planted down the center of the playground. And it's created this really great kind of area for people to go. You can see there's some picnic tables there. And this extends off to the left and basically cuts the schoolyard in half with a grove of trees. So it kind of creates a safe zone really for kids to get out of the heat and get into shade. There's a redwood deck in there as well, which is always a great idea to add a redwood deck for kids to just hang out, or a teacher to bring a group of kids and be in the shade. Next slide. This is the same area with one of our tents that we set up for the pandemic to get people outside. Next slide. Sofia.
So last fall, the maintenance department, in collaboration with an organization called Sugi, planted 3 pocket forests using the Milwaukee method. And this method has been used to reforest urban areas across the world, but the USD was the first school in the United States to plant one on school grounds. In total, we planted 3,300 saplings on 13,000 square feet of land at 3 different schools. These were all native species. Next slide. So the Milwaukee forest method is a unique way to create an urban forest and was pioneered by a Japanese botanist, Akira Miyawaki. This method utilizes native species, as I just mentioned, and requires them to be planted close together, which encourages competition and typically leads to rapid growth of the forest. This type of forest has 4 different layers. It begins with the shrub layer, then subtree layer, then tree layer, and lastly, a canopy layer. And research suggests that this method of forestation has many benefits, including an increase in biodiversity, carbon sequestration, community engagement, opportunities for environmental education, and positive health impacts. And we have also worked with native local indigenous people to also bless the land, which we did at our opening ceremony for all 3 planting days. Next slide. And this is an example of how fast these forests grow. So one of the school sites that we did this at was Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School, which is our largest middle school out of the 3. So the picture on the left was just an ornamental lawn that really had no purpose. And you can see we were starting to stop watering it to get it ready for planting day. And then the picture on the right is actually, it's probably more so 6 months after planting, but Sharon included another photo. So next slide. So this is also at the beginning, right after we planted. Next slide. And Sharon just took this yesterday. So this is really 1 full year. We just had our 1-year anniversary of planting. So this is what it looks like just 1 year after planting day, which is pretty incredible and unheard of. So we're really excited to be doing this kind of project. And we are actually doing another one on December 8th, and that one will be planted at our continuation school, Berkeley Technology Academy. Next slide. And this is just another example of what a forest could look like. This is an example of a food forest. Right here, you see some fig trees at the same school that I just mentioned, Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School. This is a part of the Edible Schoolyard Project. The Edible Schoolyard Project started in about 1983. And that was really the catalyst for our garden program. We now have 17, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we have 17 school edible gardens with a teacher dedicated to each site. And although the Edible Schoolyard Project is separate to what we do, we collaborate on our mission and have the same mission. Next slide. So yeah, this is, the space is really, really big. And these are just some more trees that are on that site within the garden. Next slide. And Steve will now talk about schoolyard forest maintenance.
Hey, my favorite part of it all. Okay, so yes, of course, you have to consider what does it take to maintain. It does change. It does change the game a little bit. Blacktop pretty much requires zero maintenance. So you're watering your trees for the establishment period. You typically have 2 to 3 years establishment period for trees or any other plant, actually. So we personally, on our 2,500 trees that we have in our inventory, we spend about somewhere in the ballpark of $40,000 a year and that's for contractors doing pruning and removing dead trees or broken branches and things like that. Our grounds crew does maintenance on trees 20 feet and smaller. And then of course, weeds. Everybody loves weeds. We at Berkeley have not used any herbicides for decades. So, I tell people that they have to increase their weed tolerance, because we can't hire enough people to keep our places looking weed free. So we get creative with our weed maintenance. Next slide, please. So this slide, we have challenges and solutions. So what I have found, I've been here 16 years in Berkeley, and really the planting and the first 3 years of maintenance on a tree makes all the difference in the world, right? We still have many, many examples of trees that were planted poorly. And, oftentimes when a tree is planted poorly, it just doesn't grow. It will grow for the first couple of years and then stop growing. So if you planted a tree that's supposed to be 80 feet tall and 50 feet wide, you wasted your money and your time because it's only getting 20 feet tall and 15 feet wide. So there's a really great resource. The International Society of Arboriculture has a young tree pruning standards. This is for pruning, not the planting. But it has really good guidance for your crews if you have staff doing the work yourselves. Because the first 2 to 3 years of the tree's life is critical. And if you do it well for the first, if you plant it well and prune it well for the first 3 years, it will pretty much be maintenance free for the rest of its life. Budgets obviously are a challenge. If you can leverage grant money, volunteerism is always, we welcome volunteerism. We have active parents. And then tracking, if you can get a tree inventory software, it's very, very helpful. We use inventory called ArborPro. It's not that expensive, actually. I think it was $20,000 to set up, where they go around and GPS tag every single tree in the district. And then it's $8,000 or $9,000 a year to track it. And it's based on how many trees you have. So that's for 2,200 trees at the time. They're very, very handy and helpful. Next slide, please. Okay, and that's it. And here we are. That's how you spell our names and our titles, in case you were interested.
Thank you so much, Steve and Sophia, for being with us today and sharing all of those wonderful examples and beautiful pictures to sort of inspire us on our way. We have a little bit of time for questions and discussion, and I know many of you have been adding your questions in the chat. All right, one moment.
I see a question there. Steve, how are the projects funded, and how might another school district work on this when they, I guess, what would be the things that you'd say are the biggest benefits for your district that would help another district to see it's a good idea for them as well? So both funding and systems change thinking.
Yeah, sure. So there are obviously multiple sources of funding. Obviously a bond program is one of your largest opportunities if you have a bond program. And if you can talk to the director or the people in charge and have them perform grounds improvement projects. So when they're going to go to replace a play structure and replace the play matting, if they can do a larger scale grounds improvement project, and they're often much smaller than most of the bond projects. Their bond project programs are used to spending $10-20 million on building new buildings. So grounds improvement projects are actually fairly inexpensive in the bond world. Another opportunity, so I think I saw one question here related to the Milwaukee Forest. If you're interested in the Milwaukee Forest, you should reach out to SUGI. It's SUGI. They are the international organization, like the preeminent international organization promoting Milwaukee Forest. They're the authority, and they actually help with us on our first project. Actually, they're helping this year as well. They helped. They connect you with a local company organization that is helping. That wants to be involved in green projects. So they raised all the funding. Well, not all. We provided labor and we did the irrigation for last year's forest. But they had a local company that wants to be a part of this kind of stuff, commit, I think it was $36,000 to help pay for all the plants and help pay for the forester. There's certified foresters, Milwaukee foresters. So anyway, that's a really great resource if you're interested in that. And then on smaller scale things, if you have a grounds crew, if you have a school that has interested parents and teachers, I'm a big fan of volunteerism. If you have, a maintenance manager or a maintenance supervisor or a director that's willing and able to put the time and energy into it. It doesn't have to cost that much money. It's the nice thing about schoolyard stuff is it's so scalable. You can do a very small, 1,000 square foot improvement, or you can do a 10,000 square foot improvement, and so start small. If you don't have big money and you don't, do something small. and just create a little space that get it started.
Great. How do you support teachers who might be hesitant to use outdoor classrooms?
Sophia, why don't you answer?
Yeah, sure. We kind of show by example. So there's always, at least in our school district, a couple who are like super champions. And once they get rolling and other teachers see how successful it is and how much students love it, we see that there's some kind of trickle effect. But I would say a lot of teachers are kind of daunted or a little bit nervous about bringing the classroom outside just because they don't know how to. So I would say providing professional development is key. And we have used some of our professional development days to do that, or present at staff meetings, and just take examples of lesson plans and teach them how they could bring it to their class. And that's what we've done with the Milwaukee Forest Project. We've shown teachers how they can utilize the space as a teaching tool by going into their staff meetings and really like going through the lesson plan. And they don't have to do it all the time, just showing them how they could take 1 hour a month or, whatever they feel comfortable with. Like Steve said, all of these things are pretty scalable. You don't have to do huge things all at once. And I would say that's also true for teaching outdoors.
I can add to that just real quick. So I kind of think of these spaces as multi-purpose rooms, because really you can do anything. During the pandemic, we had, they're definitely being used for lunch, just eating lunch, as simple as that. You could have a teacher just take their regular curriculum outdoors and be teaching that outdoors. And you could also tie it into curriculum, right? Because there's lots of science in the outdoors. So it could be, you can help create curriculum out of it as well.
There's a number of questions that address the design process and community engagement process. A couple of them are, do the designs have to go through a board approval process? But we might include approval from the school or students, teachers, et cetera. And then who is leading planning for the Milwaukee Forest?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things in there. And again, it's kind of all of the above with us. So like the John Muir project that I highlighted in the slides, I kind of created it. I saw an opportunity and kind of, the landscape architect so I hired a landscape architect, which does require board approval. The design and all that did not go to board. Another project that I highlighted was the Berkeley Arts Magnet, where it's just a large blacktop. That was a bond program, larger scale. I mean, it was under $1 million, I believe. But so that was a regular landscape architect, went to the board, went through the whole formal process with bond money and things like that. So it scales all over the place. Sophia, do you want to answer the piece about Milwaukee?
Yeah, can you restate the question? Who kind of was in charge of overseeing it? Was that the question?
Yeah, who led the planning process for the Milwaukee Forest?
Yeah, so it was definitely a group effort. We had a teacher, Neelam Patel, bring the idea to Steve, and he looked at it and thought, wow, this is really creative and innovative. And so from there, we kind of started thinking about how would we do this? How would we implement this? So we started working with Sugi. And last year, Sugi had a forest maker. So it was the forest maker from Sugi, Steve, myself, a teacher, and the grounds crew. And the grounds crew was really, really essential in this project. They do kind of all of the heavy lifting prior. So prepping the soil, amending it, doing sheet mulching, all of that stuff was done by the grounds crew. So it was definitely a group effort. And then on planting day, we had the students come and plant. So the students did the bulk of the planting on planting day, and the grounds crew dug holes, because that's the hard part. The kids weren't so good at. And so, yeah, I would say it was more a maintenance department. They facilitated the implementation of the project and oversaw it.
Do edible fruit tree orchards qualify? Do they need to be laid out as a forest rather than an orchard? Well, guess it depends.
I guess probably leave that up to whoever feels like deciding. But I mean, I do think they're different, right? The thing about fruit trees is, right, they somebody has to manage them, and it's a little more during the harvest season.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little more of a management process, right? And what are you going to do with all the food? Are you going to actually pick them and make them part of your nutrition services program? You know, and if you don't, then they just make a big mess underneath, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So it is a different beast. I'm not against it. We have our edible schoolyard that has staff there every day, and they have lots of fruit trees. But other than that, we don't have fruit trees at all of our schools. And it's mostly because of the lack of somebody committed to managing the harvesting process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and when we do have them, they are more of a garden project and managed by garden staff rather than by the maintenance and grounds crew. So they kind of operate as separate entities. Anything that's really in the garden is managed by the garden staff, and there's a whole separate program for that. So yeah, they're kind of two separate things.
Okay. So a couple questions on funding is, how are these projects funded? And is that funding sustainable and ongoing with the school district?
Yeah, I did answer one question on funding. I think the most reliable source of funding is bond funds. I would say more school districts have bond funds than anything else, and that's usually a sizable amount of money. You know, most districts look at bond funds for building improvements, but grounds, you know, schoolyard improvements is not out of the realm of a bond program. So that's, you know, you see more school districts with bond funds than anything else, right? And so that's probably your best opportunity if you have bond funds. If you don't, yeah, it gets quite a bit more challenging. You know, I mean, you have to kind of scrape up, right, and find money. You know, there's some grant programs. I know Lowe's for a long time had this small scale stuff, right? It's $5,000 grant fund, or if there's local, you know, or volunteer organizations willing to help out and things like that. For us, we have a fairly unique situation where there is a parcel tax that pays for maintenance in Berkeley. So I have an $8 million budget a year in my maintenance department that's purely committed to maintenance. It's a separate parcel tax in Berkeley. And so I have extra money, but no other school district in the world has that. So we're a little bit lucky in that way, or different in that way. So yeah, funding is always going to be an issue, right?
Yeah. And how, you know, since you are in that unique position, for others that don't have access to that sort of budget that's built in, how do you convince even the maintenance staff and the maintenance teams to respect outdoor learning environments, especially when it is easier and cheaper to do asphalt and other sterile environments? What advice would you give another school district looking to make a change?
Well, so, so for how many decades and centuries have we prioritize cost savings, right? And the lowest cost, right? And look at what that's gotten us, right? And so there's an old saying, right, that desperate times call for desperate measures, right? And I've kind of been telling people, we're way beyond the point of like replace your light bulbs with LED, right? I mean, that's not going to do it anymore, so we have to be bold. We have to, and we, even in Berkeley, with as much money as we have, we still have, the default is if it's going to cost more money, we can't add it to the project, right? And so you have to like remember to go outside of the box and try harder and think harder and think of other things to sacrifice, right? Because we're kind of, in case you haven't seen the news for the last 5 years in California, our state is on fire, and we're losing millions of trees a year to drought and fire. And that's causing this terrible vicious cycle, right? That fewer trees makes more drought and fire, right? And so when we did our first Milwaukee Forest last year, we had some feedback from community, and the main couple of concerns were you plant a bunch of trees and we don't have water to water them, right? And then fire danger, right? And so, but when you put it all on the scale, right? The water situation isn't going to get any better if our trees keep dying. You're going to get erosion and all kinds of terrible things. And so we need more trees. So it really is. We're more than just pushing people to plant trees. We're pushing people to open your mind and think differently, because the way we've been thinking has gotten us where we're at right now.
Yeah, and just to
Absolutely.
add to that too, a lot of it is also educating folks. And we've utilized our professional development to do just that with our maintenance crew. And, what are the positive health effects that they're going to feel from implementing these kinds of projects? Pulling on people's heartstrings. Most people have kids and most people want their kids to have nice outdoor experiences. So I think connecting it to the personal helps a lot. And we've even had some of our maintenance crew request that we don't use certain plastics in our schoolyards because it is more maintenance than the more natural route. So it's interesting now that we're educating folks that it's become something that's requested almost, which is really cool that we're seeing that transition within our department as well.
And those stories of how they've been positively impacted by that directly is really helpful to share to others who are at a different stage and looking for inspiration, or who keep hearing the same voices say, oh, it's not possible, or it's too expensive, oh, it's not worth it, when all of that's false.
Right. And
it feeds into a positive feedback loop as opposed to the negative feedback loop, which is what people have grown accustomed to, sadly.
Right. Yeah. Right. I mean, all school districts, certainly in California, I don't know as much about other states, but we've definitely grown accustomed to, there's not enough money to do anything, really, right? You have districts cutting music and library and all this other stuff out of their, program because there's no money. So yeah, it's a vicious cycle, really. But I mean, I would say though that a forest doesn't cost much to maintain, right? And once you plant it, so there's upfront cost and effort to plant it and water it for 2 or 3 years, and then after that, if you've taken care of that, if you've done the right thing for the first 3 years, they're almost maintenance free for the rest of their life.
Can you share a little more about the watering thing? Was it the grounds crew that were doing that? Were students participating in any of that?
So
Any challenges or opportunities you came across?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things. So the Milwaukee Forest, which we very intentionally had more student and teacher involvement. Like our plan on the Milwaukee Forest as part of the planting is that the school has to commit some people to help maintain it, because our grounds crew doesn't have enough time to add those to their maintenance schedule. So, and we had no problem at all finding a couple of teachers at each school that would bring their kids out, bring a class of kids out to help water and help weed and all that kind of stuff. For like the other projects, a couple of other projects I highlighted, the Berkeley Arts Magnet, where it was a large blacktop and we cut into areas of landscape. Those we included irrigation that are on automatic timers. But we haven't had much trouble. We actually, at the John Muir Creek classroom that we built, we planted a new big leaf maple tree there, and there's no irrigation in the area. So we had a teacher there doing watering as well. And really once a week, a couple gallons once a week is sufficient. And that's not, that's probably the 10th time I've experienced that since I've been here. So you usually don't, it's not that hard to find a teacher or two, or even parents, to commit to watering. Now you have a problem over the summer break, right? You have to figure the summer break out. But it's not that hard to find volunteers. I really encourage volunteerism. And some districts have unions that are less reasonable on that.
A lot of people are really curious about like safety concern.
And the whole
Oh my
idea of
gosh.
surveillance, that's been something that's come up for us too, is thinking strategically. And that's something that the principals, have voiced concern about, is if the trees get too tall, who will go back there? If all of our campus school grounds are also open to the public on the weekends and after school, right, Steve? Or just on the weekends?
No, after school, yeah, 6 o'clock, we turn them all, open them up to the public as like schools. Yeah.
Yeah, which we think is a blessing, but some people I think it's really awesome that the community has access to these really great spaces, but some people have voiced concern.
What are some of the barriers to people just planting trees in the first place, which we had a conversation about this before, and just surveillance and things like that. Someone asked during the meeting, as the trees age, some eventually become hazards. Are there plans to assess these mature trees, remove them if deemed hazardous, and have those trees replanted? Or your thoughts on the general notion of safety and trees? We'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So again, I really can't stress enough the first 3 years of life of the tree. If you take care of it well, it is likely to be almost maintenance free for the rest of its life. And those young tree standards that I called out from the ISA, it's you shape the tree, you find the leader, and oftentimes there's competing leaders. You have to cut one of them off because you want one leader. If there's branch connections that are stronger than others, you remove the ones that are weak. You don't let branches cross. So if you follow those, if you take care of the tree properly in the first 3 years of life, it's almost maintenance free. But of course, you do have issues. We actually had John Muir, we had a large oak tree shed a branch on a kindergarten playground. Unfortunately, it was overnight, and so nobody was playing there. So we were totally lucky there. So there is some risk. It's not zero. but what we try to do is we try to do, again, you have to have either staff or money, but we try to have every tree on every site looked at least every 4 to 5 years, which is not best practice, but nobody else has money to do more often than that. But we have 23 sites, we pick 4 sites a year and have our tree company go through and just evaluate every single tree, prune, whatever, end weight reduction, remove bad branches, so somebody sets eyes on them. But there, you can't have zero risk. It's not realistic.
But with any other kind of schoolyard, you can't have zero risk either.
No.
So
right.
there's no real alternative where there's no zero risk,
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And we see the risks of just asphalt, all the
Right.
associated risks, broken bones, etc.
That's right. That's right.
Well, speaking of healthy trees, like right place, right tree, are there particular species of trees that do particularly well in Milwaukee forests? Maybe that's a broader question. And then how does the community receive education about the species?
So it's a fairly new concept. We're 1 year into this. But the concept of the Milwaukee forest is native plants to your area. So each area is going to have their own plants. And Southern California will be slightly different than Northern California, although for the most part, it'll be the same. So yeah, you're picking native plants. Obviously in California, drought resistant matters. And it's a wide variety. We used 53 different species of plants total in the 3,300 saplings that we planted last year. So it's a very diverse variety there. What was the second part of your question? Sorry.
I think the second part, what they were asking was more in general about community education, about what's growing there and why, explaining the positive benefits and why it's important to support this kind of work.
Yeah, so at the beginning of a project, we post that the project is coming soon, and we invite the community to chat with us and ask us any burning questions that they have about the project. And that's the space where they can ask about species, concerns, excitement. So we ask them for their opinions and their feedback before we actually do the planting. And that's our best practice. And
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask Steve, do you want to add to that? Are there other opportunities where we give the public? I think that's the main one.
Yeah, it was a very community-oriented project. We had teachers there. Now, last year, we still had COVID protocols. So we didn't invite as many people as we would have normally because of COVID protocols. But this year, the idea is we have a Berkeley volunteer. There's a what's their name, Sofia? There's a group that's related to that's a part of the Berkeley School District that coordinates volunteerism, and they actually vet people and all that stuff. So we reach out to them for volunteerism. So there can be parents and other community members that don't even have kids at our school being a part of it, and that's the best way, obviously, for them to become knowledgeable. There's lots and lots of discussion as we go. There's some training when you get there because we need the adults to have some knowledge and help us guide the kids on the planting and things like that. There's not other than that. There's more. So Sofia and a couple other people are working on eco-literacy related to the Milwaukee forest, and how, and there's all kinds of science, you can come up. We actually, our science teacher that's very passionate about the Milwaukee forest and brought this to us in the first place has already created some curriculum that other science teachers can use. So that side of the, outreach is pretty robust actually, and gonna get more. But yeah, to the outer community, there's not a lot of avenues actually to do that kind of education.
And I understand that this is the first year, so there's probably a lot more opportunities in the future. This is sort of backtracking a little bit, but I don't want to bypass it. What was the soil preparation process like? What was the soil like in that little kind of dry, grassy spot there?
So yeah, our soil here is very clay, very hard, dry clay. There, as part of the process for the Milwaukee, you do a soil sample before and then a year later. Then the soil prep it's laid out in the Milwaukee method, where you add you throw in 4 or 5 inches of compost and then rototill down anywhere from 12 to 24 inches. So you're doing a really good turning of the soil with lots of compost. And one of the things that happens, one of the things you want, and one of the things that happens naturally when you do a Milwaukee forest is, you find that a lot of our soils are more bacteria based, and you want them to be less bacteria based and more fungal based. And that comes naturally kind of with the Milwaukee forest, just because it does a really good job of shading the internal part of the forest, and you get more fungal, which makes for a healthier soil.
This might be hard to answer because you're sort of early in the process. But ideally, what will this space look like in terms of access for the kids? What do you imagine the sort of programming or activities will be for kids in, now and into the future in that space?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. At the beginning, a lot of the student engagement education will be around tracking plant growth. And so that's a very easy activity for them to do, especially it fits in nicely with a science class and a science teacher, which we've had them do already. And we're actually working with a professor in New Zealand who wants to kind of compare notes with her students, and we're trying to streamline how we do the data, how we collect data. So there will be a streamlined process for collecting Milwaukee forest growth in any Milwaukee forest. So that's the main way of engaging students. One of the goals of the forest is for it to grow really quickly and to grow really tall. And so depending on how it's constructed, once it's reached peak growth, there won't be many opportunities for actually going into the forest because it will be so dense. But while it's kind of in the beginning stages, I think there's a lot of areas for student engagement, and it kind of depends on how you structure the forest itself. Some are completely compact, like the 3 that we've planted thus far, but there are others where there are pathways going through them, and there are more kind of pathways, you could say. The ones that we've built don't have that, but there are ways to construct Milwaukee forests so that there is more engagement with the internal parts of the forest. It just kind of depends on how much space you're working with.
Yeah, I imagine you can lay that out at the beginning, either pathways or alcoves for to put seating.
Yeah, I see it, one of the drawbacks of the Milwaukee forest is once it matures, it's not as interactive, right? Because you cannot go into it, you're just walking around the perimeter of it, looking at it. Like right now, ours are still, you can still walk through them, but once they fill in, so I think it's a piece of a green schoolyard. It's kind of a showcase piece, and it's definitely got, the science behind it, and it's got a lot of benefit. But our science teacher that brought this to us and is like super passionate about them just wants us to put them everywhere, and I'm like, no, we have to have some places where kids can actually have fun and interact. And the forest we have at Washington, you can go into it, and you have you can be inside the forest, and that is a really special thing too, so so I think it's all of the above, right? And each space will help you define what belongs there.
Oh yeah, I think just to add to that, I think the whole point of, part of this presentation is that there is no one size fits all. And I think Berkeley Unified is just really lucky that they have Steve, because Steve really looks at all of the spaces and has that vision of like, okay, we have an ornamental lawn here. What do we do with that? Because that's not serving us. I think a lot of maintenance managers don't have that perspective. So I think it's just really helpful that we have someone who's within our leadership who has that, like, that's his go-to question. Like, well, what do we do with this space that's just space and it's not functioning for students? It's not contributing to anything really. So I think there are so many ways in which you can do a schoolyard forest. The Milwaukee method isn't, for every single space.
Well, maybe as a final question, and then I have like a fun question just to finish up. Thank you so much for your time. Is thinking about all of your other schools and all the other projects that you've done, and again, offering yourselves as role models and examples for other districts that want to do the same. What advice do you have them for inventorying their own districts, and preparing for habitat-based design and greening their schoolyards, like inventorying both the schoolyard and other non-building spaces? Any advice? Or maybe a low-hanging fruit. Where can they start?
Yeah, so we kind of recognize, Berkeley is really big on equity. Equity is a huge piece of what everybody does these days. And so after we did the first round last year, we knew we were going to do another round this year. And so Sofia and I got together with our garden and cooking program supervisor and kind of created some criteria for choosing sites. And, there can be a lot of criteria. We don't actually have a lot of, as far as equity goes, we don't have a lot of low, free and reduced lunch anymore. We used to, but we don't anymore. But then there's different ways to look at it, right? So there's that equity piece. There's also the piece of some, school A may already have lots of greenery on it, and school B is like all blacktop, right, and grass. So there's that piece too, right? That's the physical site. Some of them need the greenery more than others. So there's that piece too. Obviously, looking at the money scale, if you're tight with money, then each site is unique. And some sites, another way to look at it is you do the easiest stuff first, right? Just to get going on it, right? So you might find that some areas have, a patch of grass, inside that gets good sun, and it would be easy to just dig it up and plant stuff, right? Or sheet mulch it, and 2 months later start planting. So, there's I think we ended up with like 7 or 8 different pieces of criteria for choosing the next site. And each site is its own unique beast, but you can find easy, ready to go areas, and then you can look and master plan for the next 5 years for bigger stuff.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, so one thing that Steve and I have done, and I just observe Steve doing, is we'll go walk around a school and just do a site visit and look at all of the spaces that we don't necessarily think are productive or contribute to the schoolyard. And I would say start there, get a team together. Maybe you have a sustainability coordinator, or you have someone who specializes in schoolyards, and just getting together and start talking and brainstorming could really be the first way to initiate the process. Just having an engaging conversation about it and actually touring the schoolyard. And I think through that and through observation and just having a conversation about it, a lot of ideas can start to arise. And then based off of that, you can pick and choose what you think are the low-hanging fruit, or, the lowest budget thing that you could do that would green a schoolyard. And I think we've had a lot of success with that.
Yeah, and I'll use Sharon as an example of a very successful model. When her kids were in elementary school at Rosa Parks, she contacted me. She had already done kind of like a master plan for greening that schoolyard. And she contacted me to get permission and to get some assistance. And, they put the big silver tub planter boxes around the schoolyard and planted. And then we ran irrigation to it. So, you can do small scale. If you can get a group of parents that are passionate, and some teachers even, and you have a maintenance department, you could even do it without the maintenance department's assistance. I've seen that happen too. But it's a group of parents could plant 2 trees a year, and in 5 years you got 10 new trees going, and help maintain them. And buying a tree doesn't cost that much money. Your PTA could even help pay for it. So don't look at the whole thing and just feel overwhelmed and do nothing, right? Take one step at a time. Just plant a tree.
Well, that's a perfect way to wrap up. So maybe a final question is, when things are difficult or discouraging or really challenging, maybe for each of you, what is either one example that you've seen or a story you can recall that reminds you of why this is such important work, and helps you continue doing it?
I would say what continues to inspire me and make me excited about Green Schoolyard projects is the way students react to the projects. We engage students during the Milwaukee Forest Planting Days, and just seeing how excited they are, and they named their plants, and they're really looking forward to coming to the forest and visiting them the next school year. That's what makes me really excited to do these kinds of projects. And also just thinking about the ways, the health benefits and the social emotional benefits, and especially during COVID, how we saw such a decline in students' behavior and mental health and physical health, and how these spaces could bring something positive when we really need it, I think has really inspired me to continue to think about how to do it and be innovative. And And when you're doing things that haven't been tested before or tried, you do get pushback. And so you just have to keep thinking creatively. And the more you do it, I think the more people get on board and see all of the positive impacts it brings to the schools.
Yeah, I love creating and building. I've been in building since I got out of high school, either construction or facilities management. And so I actually picked up the design aspect of it. Hey, Sharon. I picked up the design aspect of it, 10 years, 15 years into my career, and learned how to start putting things together that way. And I love building. I love the idea that I can build something and it's going to be seen and enjoyed by people for many, many years to come. And so taking it outside, and doing a forest or a outdoor area with, just the John Muir stuff that we did. I have so much pride and enjoyment just knowing that teachers and kids are going to enjoy that area. And the community does too, as well, right? Our sites are open to the community, and for many, many years to come, those areas are now going to be like fondly remembered and enjoyed by hundreds of kids. So I think about that kind of stuff when when I'm stressed, having a bad day.
For you, Sharon, when things get really difficult or discouraging or hard, challenging, maybe thinking of an example from your local school district in Berkeley, is there a particular place that just reminds you why this work is so important and encourages you in your work?
I think I find it all inspiring. I know it takes a while sometimes in any district, and I'm patient, so I don't know. I don't have too many frustrated moments, I'd say, luckily. But I have some fond ones, I'd say, that in the Berkeley School District that I can mention. I know in a project a long time ago, maybe 15 years ago, and Steve and I were working on Rosa Parks Elementary when my children were there, and he was helping us to green the grounds and add perimeter elements that the kids could interact with. My daughter, who was in maybe first grade or so at the time, who's now 22, told me, she came home from school one day and said, "Mommy, thank you so much for helping to make gardens at our school. We were playing horsies and we were galloping around the schoolyard. And when we got to the nibbling garden on the side where you had planted the sorrel, we got to feed that to each other. Feed it to our fellow horsies, and have it became part of the game." And so to me, that was just so fabulous to hear that the kids were making the site their own and were using the things that were out there, and that it was contributing to creative play. And so I think about how it impacts kids' well-being, and just makes school a happier place for them. And interesting, many interesting things in the grounds. And so I think it's really, I focus on the rewarding part of the work. I think I been at it a long time. Can't get frustrated and still be around after a while, right? Just wanted to give a big virtual round of applause for Steve and Sofia for this wonderful presentation that you shared with us today. I'm just so inspired, continually inspired by your work and the work that BUSD has done over the years. And in fact, the project at Washington you mentioned that started in the 70s is what sparked my master's thesis 20 years ago. So I'm just thrilled to see the work continuing and growing, and thank you for all that you do. Thank you all for coming today. It was wonderful to see you here, and we look forward to the ongoing conversation. Thank you again, Steve and Sofia.